All right, I want to show you the results of our sampling distribution from the class data that we had yesterday. So here were we had 88 samples, and this is a sampling distribution. So every p hat is a sample proportion of 50 M&Ms, and the proportion of them that are blue. And so we hypothesized that these were from the New Jersey factory. So we started off saying that, and then we decided, hey, let's take many samples and see where our data falls. And so what you see here with this normal model that I've superimposed on here, the normal model I have drawn on here is centered at 24%, which is where the data would have been centered if our data came from the New Jersey factory. But obviously, it does not look like that. If I moved this over, here is the normal model with the mean being at 20%. Okay, and actually, there's 20% right there. Okay, so look at that. It is insanely awesome how that came about. Now, when we do hypothesis testing, we actually don't have the luxury of, we don't take many, many, many samples. We actually just do take one and then infer conclusions from that one. So let's talk about our data set and some things that we know about it. So here was just like the facts. If it came from the New Jersey factory, then it would have been centered at 24% with the standard deviation of 0.06. But here's what our data did. We had 88 samples, and a p hat was a proportion of 50 M&Ms that were blue. So I could even type that in here. A proportion of 50 M&Ms that are blue. Okay, and a random sample. Okay, so then now here is actually, I put all of our data into the calculator, and there is where the average of all of our p hats was found at 0.1915. And then I did the standard deviation for that, which was 0.0596. Now, if we take a look at this data, so I went ahead and I said, okay, so where does the data fall relative to the claim? If we claimed it's from the New Jersey factory and that it should be centered around 24%, then 62.5% of our samples of our p hats fall within one standard deviation, and 93.18% of our p hats fall within two standard deviations. But here is something that is startling. We had 8 lower outliers if we say the data is centered at 24%. And let me show you where those would be. So if our data, again, is, if I moved this here, where it's centered at 24%, then I would have all of these outliers, plus not to mention all of these ones that were right on 2 standard deviations from the mean. That is a lot. When we do a hypothesis test in a couple of units, if you get an outlier amount, you would reject the claim that it came from the New Jersey factory, and you would conclude that the mean is actually less than 24%. The inference we make later this year won't say that we determine what the mean is. We just say it's definitely not 24%. Now, you know our one standard deviation, our empirical rule, 68% should be within one standard deviation, 95% within two standard deviations, and so on. Well, let's take a look at this. If our data had come from the Tennessee factory, then that would place the mean at 20%. And here we have our 71.59% falls within one standard deviation, 98.9% falls within two. So we even had a little bit more than what the normal model represents. We did have one lower outlier still. So that was just 1%. So in essence, we would have a 10% chance. 10% of our samples essentially would have rejected the claim over here if we claimed it's from the New Jersey factory. And only one of our samples would have rejected the claim that it's from the Tennessee factory and that it's even lower than 20%. So as you can see, I think that we are safe to come on over here to our notes and finish this out. If our M&Ms came from the New Jersey factory. Now, up above, that was 5 samples. But we found that from our data yesterday, there were 8 samples that would be outliers more than 2 standard deviations. So after seeing all of this, I definitely think that our M&Ms are from Tennessee, and that they have 20% um, variability, or centered around 20%. And I'm going to tell you that since these were not true M&Ms and they were actually the beads that we did this with, I know exactly what's in here. I have the luxury of knowing that. And absolutely, I counted out all of the packages of 1,000 things. I didn't count the thousands. They said it was 1,000. I dumped it in there. Anyway, there is 20% blue beads in that bag. So here we see that the data we collected held true to what actually is in the bag. And so I just want you to have confidence in statistics. And year after year after year, data falls exactly where it is supposed to. All right, so there is that. Now we're going to do our timer activity today. So to watch for tomorrow's video on how our timer videos fail and how our sample means and if they are centered around 5 seconds and how that looks. All right, I can't wait.